Christ's Letter 8. In this letter, Christ explains the reality of men and women, how to live within the laws of existence, and come into a harmonious, blessed state of being, in which all things are abundantly provided, health is restored, and joy becomes a natural state of mind. Every individual can reach this interior state of blessedness, and peace will then become the norm. I have come to you again to speak of the true nature of existence. The truth of being is this: you who believe only in the material world live entirely in the earthly, finite world. You live within a dimension of the manifestation of your beliefs. Those whose spiritual perceptions and lives have been raised in frequencies of vibrations to merge with the spiritual frequencies of vibration of the spiritual dimension can perceive that they live in two dimensions. They are fully aware of this truth, and they live according to this truth and evolve into ever higher frequencies of being. They are no longer bound by human belief, but live within the realization that they live within infinity, in which are no limitations. The higher their vibrational frequencies of consciousness, the more aware they are that they live within infinity, and that only they themselves set the limits on what they can aspire to. Those whose perceptions have been heightened in this way, whilst still in their bodies, have seen that there is only one dimension of actual individual being, and this dimension is divine consciousness activity. They may also come to fully realize there is the further dimension of universal consciousness, in which the universal resides in perfect equilibrium and may be penetrated by none, because within this dimension, any individuality would be immediately drawn into the unity of being. When a soul reaches, in understanding and realization, the topmost level of the frequencies of vibrations of consciousness, Christ consciousness, the soul can look down and review the levels of vibrations ascending and descending to those of humanity on earth and know with love and compassion humanity is trapped in the lower vibrations of divine consciousness, hidden within the ego drive, wholly unaware of the truth of being, the soul's true identity, and the earthly truth of the ego. Neither does it have the slightest awareness of the immense purpose behind its existence and the eventual mission it must embark upon. The task of the newborn soul is to experience, through means of its sheath, the psyche, all that these lower frequencies have to offer and grow as a result of the mental, emotional events and experiences arising out of their thoughts and feelings. The soul must learn, through trial and error, the state of consciousness which makes it immensely happy or burdened with grief and sorrow, which initiate various physical limitations. The purpose of life on earth is not to discover a means to experience undeviating joy and bliss, although this is what each soul longs for. Such bliss and joy would hinder the soul's progress into the higher spiritual vibrations of consciousness. Eventually, after many lifetimes of highs and lows, of comfort and sorrow, the psyche will wake up to the truth of its being and will realize that it has within itself the potential to draw on divine consciousness for insight, understanding, and knowledge, and to raise its spiritual consciousness vibrations to those of health, well-being, protection, inner growth, spiritual nutrition, and to radiate to others the nature of divine consciousness itself. As I have said before, consciousness is life, and life is consciousness. Where there is life, there is consciousness. Where there is consciousness, there is life. Everything in existence is defined by vibrational frequencies of consciousness. Light, sound, color, all physical phenomena, both living and inanimate. If you can change the frequencies of vibration of any single thing, you change the appearance of that thing, be it sound, color, gas, liquid, physical organs. When physical organs present an appearance of ill health, it is because the normal frequencies of vibrations of that physical organ have been reduced, and the life within the organ has been depleted. Science presents the universe as being matter possessing consciousness, but the truth is, the universe is consciousness, which has taken on the appearance of matter as a result of a descent into lower frequencies of vibration of consciousness. This is the true reality of existence. Nothing else. Your existence is all a matter of frequency of vibrations. The higher the spiritual perceptions and the adherence to spiritual thought, the more swift are the personal vibrational frequencies in the body. The vitality is raised and illness eventually disappears. The scientific fraternity believes you live entirely within the human dimension comprising the solar system and the galaxies of stars. Science believes the human intellect is the highest point of intelligent reference at any time, having evolved in response to changing environment and climatic conditions, and is purely the product of brain activity. According to science, your emotions are wholly real and valid, and what you think and feel is beyond all dispute. These constitute the only reality of existence. Normalcy is computed according to the average thoughts, actions, and responses to the environment. This is perceived as the human reality. Any talents which transcend the average output of average minds is reckoned as being genius arising from unusual mental powers. The below average output is said to be due to retardation due to some physical cause, genetics, birth trauma, etc. Science believes the physical dimension is the beginning and the end of existence. Science is so set against any possibility of self-delusionary beliefs that it will accept as being real any phenomenon, provided it can be computed, estimated, and proved by instruments. If you think about this carefully, you will come to realize that what science holds fast to as fact is, in reality, only belief created by drawing conclusions through the exercise of the five senses. So is it with every other facet of your existence. In your earthly dimension, facts take place second by second, but the moment they have happened, they become memory, beliefs, and memories are not always accurate. Whatever feelings and thoughts you have about the past are not facts, but points of view, beliefs, and are, therefore, not facts, not the reality behind them. This applies to every facet of your existence. The truth is, you live in a worldly dimension composed entirely of your beliefs arising from your responses to what happened 100,000 or 10,000 years ago. At one time, People believed the world was flat. Therefore, for them, they lived in a flat world and were afraid to sail the seas too far in one direction because they were in danger of falling off the edge of the world. For these people, their world was flat, while today, with knowledge, your world is accessible in every direction. People in the past, and also in the present time, directed their lives according to old wives' tale, the power of the ancestors, and other legends. They believed in them so implicitly, the limitations imposed by these beliefs restricted people's actions and activities. Dancing was believed to be sinful and wicked by certain Christian sects, for instance. Therefore, many people who would have derived great happiness and release from stress when dancing were wrongfully denied this pleasure. Religion comes under the same heading. Beliefs are the very substance of religion. They are founded on age-old happenings, which are nothing but belief. The beliefs may have been relevant to the general mindset of those times, but they have long since become irrelevant in a constantly changing world, yet they are strictly adhered to and become the focus of worship, festivities, celebrations, mourning, and more destructively, they become the reason for men killing one another and causing horrific misery to women and children. Certain religions claim that God is everywhere and in all things, but also affirm dogmatically that no one knows the mind of God or the reasons why people kill one another. It may be in God's plan, they say. With mindsets composed of a conglomeration of illogical beliefs, where can mankind, at this present time, find any certainty of beauty, joy, health, well-being, love? Religious ideas present a God whose will can bring life and healing or death and destruction. In such beliefs, there is no certainty of anything other than uncertainty. With such a belief, any sickness or abnormality can be excused as being God's will. It is your beliefs which control all your expectations of what life may hand out in the future. Healthy agnosticism, the kind of mindset which accepts it, does not know the nature of God or whether there is any God at all, but is perfectly open to the conviction imparted by enlightenment, is preferable to fanatical beliefs in half-truth or non-truth. How blind is the human race generally! People are like moles living within their tunnels, convinced they are capable of sizing up the entirety of their existence by using their senses of hearing, smell, very limited vision, and touch. Thus may you descend the scale of life forms and witness thousands of species living lives entirely defined and limited by their senses. What they can perceive as real constitutes their personal reality, their particular world. Every strata of existence experienced by various species of living things is distinct from every other within the earthly dimension. This includes the human mind, which is literally possessed by religious doctrines and dogmas and imprisoned in scientific theories and mathematic formulas. Religious doctrines have been conceived by human reasoning in an effort to explain the teachings of spiritual masters, whose minds have moved beyond the human sphere of intellect into the heavenly spheres of inspired perception of universal reality. Scientific concepts are also the product of the human senses, rationalizing and giving names to phenomena viewed by human sight during experimentation. When, therefore, The human intellect is able to set aside such limited beliefs and ascend into contact with the reality beyond the highest human reasoning, logic, and rationalizations, which are termed knowledge. Such a mind enters the higher spheres of life consciousness. It is imbued with universal truth, which is literally beyond the scope of the normal human mind to perceive, or accept, or understand. The human mind cannot understand any experience beyond that of the electromagnetic parameters of earthly existence and the functions of the brain until divine consciousness enlightenment enters the entire human system of mind, emotions, and subconsciousness. Then the underlying unity and harmony is revealed. When altogether new spiritual perceptions are presented to a religiously indoctrinated mind, these are perceived as being from Satan or sheer lunacy or imagination. This is natural since when the emotions are severely aroused and challenged, as happens when deep beliefs are contradicted, the magnetic emotional bonding rejection impulses of the ego drive immediately come into action. Any thesis or proposal which causes the conditioned mind acute mental discomfort, dismay, or puzzlement will be rejected instantly, and a whole barrage of proofs will be summoned from the beliefs in the conditioned mind to back up such rejection. But the proofs are merely beliefs. This is an entirely natural mental emotional process within the purely human dimension. Therefore, if this, my truth, is offered to those whose mindsets are firmly established and conditioned by fear or strengthened by the human will to adhere to such programmed beliefs, it is only natural that the truth will arouse unruly emotions and be quite violently, possibly virulently rejected. The foregoing is a description of normal mental emotional activity within the human dimension. It should not be criticized since a conditioned mind is made to feel completely insecure and adrift or all at sea when confronted with an entirely new concept. These human idioms describe exactly what happens when an indoctrinated mind is challenged by an entirely new perception of what was previously held to be so dear, so safe, so right. When first reading these letters, you can determine for yourselves where you stand mentally and emotionally. Are you blocked from spiritual progress by your stubborn adherence to present beliefs? Are you able, after due thought, to realize that all you are so sturdily upholding is only belief, irrational belief? It is absolutely vital to your spiritual development that you should, at long last, fully understand the principles of your human mind and emotional functioning. You think you do, but you do not understand it at all. You can only understand it by coming out of it entirely, transcending it, moving into higher dimensions of perception and experience, entering into truth itself. Only then do you begin to perceive that you and every other person in the world have lived and directed your lives almost entirely by human beliefs, not truth. There are many people who believe wholeheartedly that if they pray for a certain object or experience, or the bestowal of the right guidance in a certain situation, they will truly receive the right object, experience, or guidance, which will enhance their well-being. They believe that when, if their prayer is answered, they will wholeheartedly rejoice and immediately follow the lead, irrespective of present conditions, because, coming from the divine, It can only be the right answer, conducive to happiness. However, when faced with the arrival of the longed-for object, or experience, or guidance, the recipient of divine grace sometimes becomes so disturbed or disoriented, unable to accept that there has been an intrusion of divine consciousness exactly as asked for, that he or she does not know how to deal with it. If minds are so disturbed when what they have asked for is actually given them in an unexpected way, where is the true faith and belief which they were so certain they wholly possessed in abundance? Do you not also see that belief, not truth, has orchestrated the whole symphonic movement, with the exception, of course, of the divine consciousness intervention, the answer to the prayer? This intervention is the only reality in the whole procedure. The rest is belief and hope, mental gymnastics using past experiences by which to measure the present. Your only truth is divine consciousness, which leads only to growth and perfection, if you fully trust it to do so. Pause here and read and reread the foregoing paragraphs, because what goes on in your consciousness is the fabric of your experiences and lives. So, question yourselves. Do you really perceive, realize, understand the reality as being the source of all knowledge and creativity? Or do you merely pay lip service and superficial mental acknowledgement to divine consciousness? Do you fully and completely live, minute by minute, in the realization that universal consciousness is the only reality and highest intelligence operational within creation? Do you consistently depend on its supremely effective guidance? Or do you think that you would rather live by your own finite will and sometimes muddled emotional impulses? And if you are given direct guidance to follow a certain lead, but stop to think whether the guidance is leading you where you think you want to go, are you fully surrendered to the highest intelligent authority, divine consciousness? Is this not an indication your ego is still in control? Even these letters, when circulated as intended, will come to be beliefs, not the pure spiritual perception of what is, out of which these words have come. Only by taking these words into meditation, after asking for spiritual illumination, will the spiritual reality behind the words eventually come like a shaft of light into the mind. When this happens, you will know that you know. Those of you who have evolved sufficiently to live in 2 dimensions, you whose minds can move beyond the realm of human intellect into the higher dimension of universal reality, will probably encounter many people in time to come who will reject these letters as imagination. But be not dismayed. Remember what I am telling you now. You are residents of 2 dimensions, and none may pass beyond the dimension of mere intellect until the prerequisites to spiritual enlightenment have been fulfilled. These are a true spiritual awakening, leading to deep insight into the activities of the ego and selfhood, followed by remorse, remorse, remorse. This is the only way. For remorse, in turn, leads to the rejection of the magnetic emotional dimension of rejection bonding, which, in its more virulent forms, humans described as sin. When a person penetrates the spiritual dimension and is imbued with life characteristics, the person begins to realize and eventually know that the human ego drive to look out for the self actually shuts the soul off from the continuous inflow of divine life into the mind, heart, body, relationships, and daily experiences. Looking out for yourself is a human, earthly experience. Total, sincere surrender of the selfhood to Father life removes the block between the spiritual dimension and the soul. A person no longer has to look out for himself. All that divine life is now flows into the individual's body, mind, heart, experiences, and relationships. Such a person lives by instinct and follows hunches which always work out perfectly in the long term. Divine life is always there to be accessed whenever the person surrenders self-will and turns to it for every need. You must remember that I am referring to the time when you penetrate the human dimension of intellect and move beyond your reliance on intellect and material means to get you what you want out of life. Many people think they have reached this place of spiritual development, but are deluding themselves. When a person abandons logic and knows beyond all doubt that guidance can be utterly relied upon to achieve inspired goals, your life changes. Benefits flow into your experience when you fully realize that divine consciousness is the unseen reality, the power at work behind the outer appearances of your life, moving intelligent energy force to manifest your needs. You do not have to deny appearances or pour thought power into a condition you are seeking to resolve. All you have to do is surrender self-will and know that as your limited intellect yields, so does the infinite reality move in to order your life in an altogether new way, to wean you away from all your supports of the past, bring to your mind a new vision for a new endeavor, and lead you into new areas of activity. But when this happens, you have to be prepared to let go completely. You have to release your grip on the securities of the past and know that even greater securities of a different nature await you as you follow your inspiration. Since this state of spiritual human existence and harmonious well-being depend entirely on a person's ability to make true contact with divine reality, it is imperative to return again and again to an in-depth study of divine reality itself and the way in which the ego drive is ceaselessly at work within the human consciousness, blocking out the intuitive directions of the divine life within the mind. At the moment, you are living in a shadowy, burdened existence instead of consciously living within and entering into divine consciousness and allowing it to permeate and gladden your thinking and life experiences. You remain locked within the mental emotional framework of electromagnetic impulses until you set your willpower to consciously dissolving the fabric of your humanly conceived beliefs and come to see clearly that your reality is divine consciousness, not your family or bank book. When you achieve this insight, you will enter into light, and the light will abide in you. Because of the discomfort and the tug-of-war between the evolving soul and the human ego, which demands to look good rather than be good, and yet cannot bear the thought that it may ever be imperfect. There are few people receiving inspiration and passing it on to others at this time who will speak about the need to go through a period of inner cleansing. Modern people are conditioned to instant service, instant light, instant heat, instant food, drink, clothes, and entertainment, and therefore are not attracted to a truth which involves self-sacrifice, hard work, and total dedication to the goal. Besides which, many of these teachers are making a good deal of money out of their activities, and they must present a truth that will sell. If your modern teachers speak of a path of attainment to the highest dimensions by means of the transference of personal mental illumination, it will still be necessary to undergo the inner intense self-examination and purification of the bonding rejection of magnetic emotions. If you are truly on the upward path to the highest spiritual dimensions, your road will be characterized by moments of bright, clear-sighted self-inspection and self-realization, followed frequently by self-loathing. This dark and painful feeling is the magnetic emotion in reverse. Where before, the ego clung to its essential vision of itself as being the greatest and even greater than others, it now begins to glimpse the agonizing fact that perhaps it is not only slightly, but very imperfect. Any person reaching this spiritual level of development will find they are now traveling the road to true humility. Take heart when you find this happening to you. You are now pushing away the debris of past erroneous beliefs about yourself and your illusory selfhood. Remember that it is your intention or motivation or conviction which gives creative power to do whatever you want to do. The moment that you desire with all your heart to reverse your normal trend in your magnetic emotional patterns, you have set this process in motion. If you clearly define the goals you wish to achieve and keep them ever before your vision in writing or in mind, very shortly you will discover that the desired changes have taken place in your consciousness. When this happens, you will feel a lightness in spirit and will have moments of pure joy. You will be proving that the truth of being does bring captive hearts into the perfect freedom of spiritual living. At the same time, you have to understand that your ego must, of necessity to enable you to survive, make you believe you are of value to yourself and other people. Any external, serious challenge regarding the value of the self is highly destructive. A desperate fear and internal subsidence of confidence will lead to the conviction that you are without value in the world, and suicide can be the natural outcome. Therefore, your progress will and must be gradual. No one should ever expect people to be wholly changed by words of advice or times of inspiration. Growth can only take place very gradually, one insight at a time. A true spiritual insight will imbue a person's mind with an altogether new point of view, which will enable him to begin to approach certain related circumstances in life differently. This insight must direct the person's actions until it has been absorbed completely into the consciousness for eternity and becomes part of the soul evolution. For instance, a man may have the idea that he will be successful in life if he enforces his will aggressively on those who come within his orbit. He believes he will be better heard if he shouts. Then he may wake up to the fact that no one likes him much, and he is avoided by employees and friends. He may become more aggressive because he now feels humiliated, or, if he is an evolving soul, he will question what he can do about his isolation. The moment that divine life seeps into his consciousness, psyche, and makes him realize that he himself avoids people who shout, he will have a flash of inspiration. He will realize that, to be happy and successful, he should treat others as he likes to be treated. You may argue that this perception is not necessarily inspired, but is born of common sense, that he himself was responsible for arriving at this realization. However, this is not so. Ego thoughts are dictated solely by the bonding rejection impulses. Any new wisdom comes from loving intelligence. This may be the last inspired flash of insight he will ever have. But if he is truly on a spiritual path and seeking the highest dimensions of attainment, he will gradually perceive that this first overcoming of the ego is not enough. He will begin to see other previously unsuspected selfish patterns of behavior. He will define a further goal just out of reach at that moment, but very shortly, with prayer and meditation, he will have achieved that goal also. In this way, his consciousness frequencies of vibration will be elevated, and he will gradually move towards the celestial kingdoms of consciousness, the kingdom of forever, the kingdom of heaven. Alternately, a woman may only feel secure by not disturbing the present status quo. She is afraid to speak out when treated with a lack of respect. Such a meek person, whilst more comfortable taking refuge in silence, will also suffer deep resentments because people do not respect her passive personality. Such people usually turn to religion for comfort and reassurance, and because of non-comprehension of the laws of existence. She will probably remain static in her meekness to the end of her time on earth. Indeed, because of my words recorded in the Gospels, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth," the Church has taught that meekness is to be commended. She may feel that her meekness is the way to the light. However, if the meek little lady should find the truth concerning her being, and should find the right way to make contact with universal consciousness, she will eventually be told inwardly and clearly that, spiritually, she is the equal of everyone else. She will be inspired to express herself well. She will be given the strength to speak her truth in a more confident and attractive way. People will begin to respect this new person, and she will be manifesting the inner spiritual development gained during her times spent in meditation. Remember, you are not on earth to please God, as your church may tell you. You are on earth to express God and to make ever closer and closer contact with universal consciousness until you become free of the magnetic emotional bondage. I must make it clear that my words have been mistranslated in the gospel. I said, "Blessed are those with peaceful hearts, for they will inherit the earth." If you contemplate the world, you will see that those countries with peaceful hearts prosper and live in harmony with their neighbors. Where there are upheavals and genocide, this turbulence is the direct manifestation of the consciousness of the inhabitants. Such a consciousness destroys a country and begets poverty and illness. Sometimes a country such as Tibet, adoring its own isolation and spiritual rituals and beliefs, may be suffocating under the weight of its own human spiritual creations. The inhabitants need to be forced out into the turbulent world that they may put their beliefs to the test. They also bring what is real in their thinking to others who are burdened with magnetic emotional responses to life. They have been the means, in a small way, of relieving the pain experienced in modern society. Whilst on this journey towards light, the celestial kingdoms of divine consciousness, you will undoubtedly undergo rocky and bumpy experiences until you achieve your true goal. You will experience times of wondrous joy and times when your heart is heavy and your emotions dragged this way and that because you feel there is an impenetrable barrier between yourself and divine consciousness. You may have heard of the dark times of inner distress when a person no longer knows what he is meant to be doing or where he should be going. Then, suddenly, just when this spiritual isolation is no longer bearable and the traveler has surrendered his inner self completely, light illuminates the mind, and the person will see some marvelously deeper truth concerning existence, will perceive more clearly his source of being. He will be filled with joy because God has spoken. Yes, divine life has penetrated his consciousness and lifted him safely along the path leading to the attainment of the highest spiritual consciousness of the celestial kingdoms, the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, the way forward is through the means of such moments of profound revelations. They must be treasured and remembered, otherwise all the spade work of the self will be lost, and the seeker will be continually pushed back to where he began the search. Faith must be strong at all times. Dithering about avails nothing. When I descend into your planes or dimensions of consciousness, I have seen seriously inclined seekers of truth uplifted for a few hours and joyfully telling people of their experience, and then, a little while later, doubting what they were so certain they had received earlier. This slows down the process of spiritual development. These times of doubt should be strenuously resisted and overcome by meditation and prayer. For what is doubt but an undermining of what you have known and believed in? Doubt is a negative creative consciousness force directed against the very experience of divine life which lifted your spirit on high. You create within yourself a little war between your experience of divine consciousness and your human blindness. You will probably destroy the memory of that divine moment and erase all vestiges of spiritual upliftment and development it brought into your consciousness. This conflict will leave you feeling jaded and dispirited, and you will probably never realize that all alone and unassisted you have wrought this negative transformation in yourself. People on the spiritual path frequently do this to themselves and hinder their spiritual development, never stopping to question what right they have to relapse into this self-indulgent exercise. People use their minds recklessly, blighting their lives and the lives of other people with their thoughts and words arising from their ego drive. For it is only your thought life and emotional upheavals which end in quarrels and mayhem, not your faces, bodies, hands, and legs, unless the quarrels end in physical abuse. But even bodily contact has its origins in the frustration of the ego within mind and emotions, and conveyed to the limbs to vent the uncontrollable wrath. In this way, marriages and friendships begin in mutual joy and eventually end in misery and mutual rejection because people find it impossible to channel their ego drive into life and love preserving modes of self expression. Parents and children express mutual love until the teen years, and then hatred enters the scene and sours the relationship when children rebel against authority and parents react with self righteous abuse. Again, there is no need for such conflict. Parents must surely realize that every generation fights to find its feet in the adult world and do things more innovatively than did their elders. How can young people thrive if shackled to youthful bondage? When children become young adults, this is growing time for parents who must now prepare for the next stage of their life, the more inspired use of their latent talents, and then old age, acceptance of their past follies and mistakes, and, at last, a peaceful transition into eternal light. Why quarrel? Why fight? People wholly controlled by ego let fly and hammer away for their rights. Spiritually mature people solve problems by discussing them empathetically. What does this mean in human terms? It means listening to the other person with the spoken or silent acknowledgement that the way the other person felt, feels, in a certain situation is as valid and worthy of respect as were are your feelings. When overtaken by a serious confrontation in which neither of you are prepared to yield an iota of ground, go away on your own and take time to realize that what you are engaged in is a battle of consciousness. The battle is not enjoined only as a result of what was actually done and said in a moment of extreme heat. What really took place was the upshot of what you both are in consciousness. This involves your backgrounds. The conflict springs from the personality itself, the type of ego drive a person possesses, the basic perceptions of right and wrong, the normal attitudes each have towards other people, and life generally. Therefore, when you have conflict or confrontation, tell your opponent you are taking time off to stand still and quieten your mind to be able to listen more helpfully. Then, be very wise. Call on divine consciousness for an intervention of loving consciousness into the situation. Try to realize and visualize that both of you stand in the light of divine consciousness, equal in soul origins, equal in destiny, equally real, equally human, equally unique. Until you can fully immerse yourself in this realization, this state of mind, you are not yet ready to stand in the divine light to lovingly sort out your conflict and hurt feelings. Return to your opponent and suggest you should meet and each have 5 or 10 full minutes in which to clearly, quietly explain your point of view, your perception of what was actually said, what the fight is really about, how feelings were hurt, how the matter should be resolved. Choose to let the other speak first, and again surrender the situation to divine consciousness. If there is a great deal of bitter accusation taking place, try to subdue your own ego and remain absolutely silent and calm. This will be a great help to the other speaker, since he will feel he is being heard. It will obviate the feeling of frustration. Rationally, realize you are helping your opponent, but do not puff yourself up for being superior. Try your best to see how much of what is being said is true about yourself. Whatever it may be, if valid, bite your tongue and accept it. Be glad and rejoice, because in that moment, you have had a moment of insight into your own human consciousness, giving you an opportunity to get rid of a facet of ego drive. Every time you are able to rid yourself of a little ego drive, you allow your soul more breathing space and room for more active control of your personality. You also rise in consciousness frequencies of vibration and feel a degree lighter within yourself. By these means, you grow psychologically and spiritually. Listen to the feelings of the other person. Try to restrain your own and empathize with your sparring partner's emotions. Feel his hurt, his indignation, his anxieties. Put aside your own and feel his. And his represents both genders for brevity. Ask yourself, if someone had said or done to you what you have said or done to the other, how would you feel? If you can set aside your ego sufficiently to be able to consider this, then you are on the way to overcoming the kind of ego drive which puts self above every other consideration and is unable to see any other point of view. Before speaking, calmly wait in silence until your sparring partner's 10 minutes are fully up, even if it means he finishes before time and both of you remain in silence for a while. Acknowledge, as pleasantly as you are able, that you have heard what he has said, and you can understand why he is upset. In that instant of self-control, realize that you have gained a modicum of control over yourself, and you have taken the first step to healing the situation. On the other hand, if you have not truly understood what he has told you, then you are mentally blocking something he is saying, which you do not want to hear or receive. Therefore, again, your ego is in control. Control it and invite him to explain further. And again, do your best to put yourself in his place. Feel his pain. Understand his anger. When you have received the other person into your understanding and acknowledged it, his ego defenses will begin to lessen. You will see him begin to relax. Both of you will feel better. Having done this, quietly, slowly, carefully, you then give an equally clear picture of the way that you felt in the circumstances. Do not use words calculated to set your opponent down and thus upset him. Remember that 1. You are making an effort to control your ego as a prelude to unconditional love. 2. You are working to achieve peace and understanding between you, not points. 3. Your reply should not lead to further conflict because you have used words likely to further upset him. If it does, then your ego has won the round against you. Your psyche has lost. If you are both living in the spiritual frequencies of consciousness, it will follow that your opponent will accord you the same response of listening, thinking, and acknowledging your position as you gave him. But if he lives entirely in the earthly consciousness frequencies, you may encounter difficulties. He may feel you are trying to score points by being holy, superior, or bigger in some way. Calm him down. Tell him it is painful to have conflict between you. You are only trying out a method to ensure both of you get a fair hearing from the other, and reach a truly mutual forgiving reconciliation instead of a superficial one when hurt feelings are left to fester in the mind and heart and body. You should each give the other the right to disagree in gentle words, giving valid reasons for the disagreement. Find the fortitude within yourself to recognize that you, as a human being, cannot possibly be always right, since you, like everyone else, has been born with a controlling ego drive, which forces you to take up and strongly defend the position of top dog. Remember that whilst you believe yourself to be top dog, he too believes the same thing. Humanly, he believes himself to be at least on an equal level with yourself, if not superior. Whatever his ego causes him to think about himself and his point of view is exactly the same as your ego causes you to think about your opinions and ideas. When you can bring divine consciousness into the arena of your human consciousness, you have literally received, with compassionate acceptance and love, the human reality of each of you into yourselves, have dissolved the negativity between you, and raised the frequencies of your consciousness vibrations, leaving you feeling lighter and more vibrant. Since this leaves you in perfect peace, no longer in conflict, this is extremely important to your well-being. If, however, you should refuse to listen and empathize and accept with loving forgiveness the truth of another person, the rejection creates an emotional magnetic rejection energy which joins and reinforces other residues of rejection energy force within the consciousness electromagnetic fields of your entire system. Rejection magnetism depletes the bonding magnetism between cells, and ill health sets in. The fact of existence is the ground of all psychosomatic medicine. People who constantly blame and judge others and keep a wholly closed mind in regard to their own part in conflict eventually experience some kind of radical breakdown in their physical or emotional makeup. If they can monitor and work on this tendency to exercise control, judge others, and exonerate themselves from blame, and can eventually give their soul full mastery in their personality, the breakdown of whatever kind it is will ultimately disappear completely. If, during conflict with another, you give time, space, and understanding, but only encounter stubborn resistance in the form of a continual statement of personal aggrieved feeling, then you are dealing with ego blindness, and the only thing to do is to laugh, concede defeat, and walk away. Providing you walk away with forgiveness and understanding of their controlling ego, you may have conceded defeat, but you gained a victory over self and refrained from introducing negative vibrations into your consciousness field. The very worst thing you can do to promote discord is to tell a person they shouldn't feel a certain way, or they do not mean what they are saying. These two sayings are a gross violation of the dignity and respect due to the other, and you have rejected the human reality of the other person. You may question a person. Do you really mean what you are saying? If the answer is yes, then it must be accepted, and the discussion should continue from that point. Never ignore what another person is trying to tell you, because you do not want to face up to what is being said. This is cowardice and gives points to your ego. Be brave and listen with both ears open to receive the truth behind the words. You must accept the reality of a person, whether you agree with it or not, even if a facet causes you shock or displeasure. Remember, you do not know the full circumstances out of which that human consciousness has grown into its present form. If you judge, criticize, condemn in any way, you have erected a barrier between yourself and that person, which will not be removed, no matter how much you may wish to overlook everything negative in him and become friends in the future. Unknowingly, what you reject in him will remain in your consciousness as a foundation for future discords, which will build up and eventually outweigh the affection. Unwittingly, you will say things in the future reflecting your underlying secret mistrust or displeasure. Instead of accepting his weaknesses with love and helping him deal with and overcome them, you will put him on his guard against you, and he will never fully trust you. Your ego and his ego will have had a secret battle which neither of you will be aware of consciously. Love could turn to hate. Remember, your life is a state of consciousness in which thoughts and feelings are deposited as in a safety box. Let acceptance and caring be the steel of which the box is made. When you have an encounter with someone to whom you are drawn, if only in friendship, and you discover that there are elements in his past which are contrary to your principles, you have the option to remain in contact with him, fully accepting his past, and possibly in future situations pointing out the characteristic logically and lovingly, helping him grow, or, if this is impossible, promptly removing yourself from the situation until you can see his problems from the perspective of loving acceptance, inspired by divine consciousness, and you find him receptive to your principles. You must never accuse a person of acting out of an ego impulse. All human beings are ego-driven to a greater or lesser extent. Never take a stance which will humiliate another. When I was on earth, I urged people to forgive and to abstain from judgment, criticism, condemnation. The church has misinterpreted this as meaning you must please God by loving others and abstaining from the negative emotions. This is not what I meant at all. There is no God who needs to be pleased by your behavior. You are masters of your fate in that you always reap what you sow. All of the foregoing pages have been directed at giving you details of how to avoid sowing weeds in your vegetable patch, how to remain healthy, happy, prosperous. A time will come in your spiritual development when you will awaken to the enormous gift you have in your head, the gift of creative, intelligent thinking. And you will also become aware of the enormous responsibility you bear towards the way you use it. There are wonderful people in your world who have used their minds in such a way as to gain insight and growth from the daily challenges in their lives. Step by step, by probing, analyzing, moving on to new viewpoints, higher understanding, they fashion new ideals for themselves. They adopt these ideals as guidelines for their future behavior. By these means, they are able to purify their thinking, words, actions, in order to redefine their mode of conduct in the world and of attending to relationships. These are self-made people, but rarely do you find that they have not also drawn strength, insight, inspiration, emotional stability from the higher source, divine consciousness, or their perception of what they may call God. When on earth, I told the people a story, the parable of the 10 talents. I said that a lord of much wealth was going abroad for a while, and he left each of his 3 servants a sum of money. To one he gave 10 talents, to another 5, and the last one he gave 1 talent. When he returned, he asked each servant what use they had made of the money. One said he had doubled the master's investment, and the other said that he had gained half again, and the last man said he had sat on it, fearing to lose what he had been given. The master complimented the first 2 servants on their efficiency and ingenuity, but he was angry with the servant who had not attempted to make anything at all of the 1 talent left in his care. Each one of you in the world have your own amount of talent with which to work. If, on your own initiative, you find it hard to discover the best way to make a profit out of your personal talent and resources, draw on divine consciousness through meditation, and little by little, the ideas will surely come, and these will be exactly suited to your own personality. At the same time, consider how you have used your talents throughout your lifetime. Have you been engrossed entirely in creating happiness and pleasures for yourself? Or have you devoted time also to the upliftment or improvement of the life of others? It is a terrible thing to have been given talents above the average and to end your lives having squandered them in self-indulgent modes of living. Whatever lessons you have failed to learn, whatever growth you have evaded, whatever development in spirituality you have deliberately avoided, or mountains you have created for yourself to climb in your next lives, they will obstruct your path and will have to be dealt with spiritually or again repeated in a further life. It is not necessary to make a great way in the world, achieve advancement or wealth or fame. You can use your talents as a parent, seeking the best means of becoming successful in your job of promoting your children's well-being. What higher calling is there than to be a good, loving parent, more especially if you take as your role model the divine father-mother consciousness, which is entirely directed at growth, nutrition of mind and body, healing of mind and body, regeneration of mind and body, protection in every form, and the fulfillment of every need of mind, emotions, body, within a system of law and order and unconditional love. As a parent, have you measured up to the consciousness of your divine source of being? Some of the people who have made best use of their talents have been servants, those who have looked after other people's children with devotion and love, cleaning the house with conscientious attention to detail, creating a peaceful, calm, and caring environment for the employer with love and gentleness. These are the great souls, the ones who have made paths for themselves leading directly into the kingdom of heaven. Alternately, there are people who have used their talents for the purposes of the destruction of others, to feed their vanity and the cold emptiness within their own hearts. Ultimately, their use of their minds has led to their own destruction. Think of the people in history and in the present time who have brainwashed others into rebellion. They have become dictators. They think about the likely end of such dictators. Such people have abused the privileges bestowed by mind power, and they eventually pay the price, but not before they have ruined thousands of lives for no good reason. For there could never be a good reason for turning countries into war-torn wildernesses and ruining a prosperous economy. Think of families where emotional and mental abuse is rife. This is an abhorrent use of mental power. It rebounds to the abuser in many, many ways: ill health, sickness, addictions, depression, and loss of self-esteem. However, do not use your brains, intellect, insight, knowledge, education as a platform from which to criticize, judge, or condemn others who do not measure up to your own standards of efficiency or goodness in any area of your life. At the same time, since to criticize, judge, and condemn is as natural as breathing to the human ego, do not attempt to deny your perceptions of what might be improved. To do so is to deny the reality of the evolutionary process. The purpose behind existence is to experience and improve upon your experiences. Therefore, do not judge or condemn or reject the deficiencies you observe in others, but take your perceptions immediately to divine consciousness and continually ask for a divine resolution of the problem. Hold fast to the realization that wherever, whenever divine consciousness is drawn into a problem, the end result is always growth and development for all concerned. Try to bear in mind always, you are on earth to bring divine consciousness down into your daily life, relationships, and circumstances. You are there to use your minds for this special purpose. When I have said I have come to help you find life more abundant, I meant that I have come to help you work through your magnetic emotional bondage and to find and make true contact with divine life, the source of your being. Out of this contact comes increased life, which far transcends the physical life you draw from your food alone. Out of this contact comes spiritual direction, protection, and a divinely inspired path. You could call this the path of Christ consciousness. When you have perceived some deeper truth previously hidden from your consciousness, you must accept and rejoice that divine consciousness has penetrated your human consciousness and spoken within your mind. Give sincere thanks and treasure this gift and reverence it. Never take it for granted, otherwise you will block further entrance of loving intelligence. You will wonder why you feel so alone again. People speak of being transformed by the inner spirit. The terminology of inner spirit is not wrong. I have gone to great lengths to try to rid your minds of old terminology, which may have an inaccurate meaning for you. At the same time, I want you to understand that once you have grasped what I really mean, for I have been so grossly misinterpreted in the past that I do not want this to happen again, you must not be bound down by the terminology itself. So long as you know what the inner spirit really is, divine life consciousness operating out of infinite universal consciousness, and has nothing to do with the spirits of the departed, you may use the terminology which has most meaning for you, provided it is the meaning given you in these letters. To return to my original statement at the beginning of this new section. It is frequently said that people can be transformed by the power of the Spirit. Such a transformation is not possible. There is nothing real in your human self which can be transformed. Your soul has been drawn from divine life consciousness and is therefore perfect.